G'day and welcome to the Inforunners. I'm Execute and joined today by Badges, and we're going to be
Hello.
discussing. What are we going to be discussing, Badges? I guess it's the real kind of difference that will be capital ship combat. It's not something that I think a lot of people have really looked into. Give me your thoughts on it. I guess we'll start there at the broad
Yeah.
overview.
So, we're primarily focusing on the way that capital ship combat is going to look different for players.
Mm.
We don't have a lot of detail on this. There's not a lot of current stuff other than other works in progress that you can kind of look at and go, I see how that might look in capital ship combat. So there's going to be a lot of kind of speculation, I guess.
But also,
But it's definitely going to be... Sorry,
we're going to be pulling from real world knowledge, so to speak,
Yes.
as well, and how it works in bigger things like what you used to work on. So, do you want to tell people a little bit about your expertise, I guess?
Yeah, so I joined the Royal Navy back in 2002 as a warfare officer, and I spent time I did some work in Northern Ireland. I did a lot of work in the Gulf and the Mediterranean, unsurprisingly, and worked all the way up from small mine warfare vessels, frigates, destroyers, and actually ended my career on an aircraft carrier. So, go ahead.
I can't unsee you in Minecraft now. Just from
Oh yes, yeah, that's it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so basically looking at those bigger ships that you've worked on and basically extrapolating those out into bigger ships in Star Citizen, and you can quickly look at the differences of what it's going to be like. So you got a single seat fighter, that's but then you got something bigger like a Constellation. You could probably have you and a couple of friends over Discord. But when you go up to something much larger, we're talking 24 plus players. You can't have all those people on Discord at once. It'll be absolute chaos. And anyone that's done a raid will tell you it can be a bit chaotic. And if we go higher than that, we're going to have some kind of hierarchical system. So where do you think that's going to, I don't know, start or lead, whatever you want to call it there? So where do you think
it's kind of... So, I mean, the best example I can give, if anyone's familiar with this, is Armor, the Milsim game. They released or they created mods effectively for third-party voice software. So stuff like Teamspeak, which I know is a bit old. I know we've all kind of transitioned to Discord now, but you'll find that old Armor communities still use Teamspeak, and it's because there are plugins that allow them to simulate talking on various different radios at once. So you drop the various different radios into your kit, you actually set them up in games, you put the right frequency in and whatever else, and then using different key presses, you can talk to and listen to different radios, and you can do it exactly like you would in real life, right?
You've literally just created another profession, ship's comms officer. Like that's going to be a thing. I can see that now. That's crazy. Okay, keep going. Sorry.
And that's all right. And you kind of get this simulation of.
Oh, and you
can tell things to happen in one ear and other ears. So you have, if you're listening to three nets, you have one that is just right, you have one that is just left, and then your third one, obviously, is both ears. So depending on how you hear it, you know which net you're responding to. And if that sounds complicated, imagine what it's going to be like with fleets, with, wings of their own fighters, with damage control teams, potentially dealing with a boarding, having to call out torpedoes incoming to the gunners, dealing with repairs with the engineers. It's going to be, I think you're exactly right. I think having other roles where you kind of, like a chief engineer, where you take control of maybe all of the damage repair, damage control, all that sort of stuff, because then your captain talks to your chief engineer, tells him what the intent is, and your chief engineer kind of cascades that information in the best way they see fit.
I kind of see it within crews within the ship. So you might have, like, you gave the engineer as an example, like that's an engineering crew, and they're maintaining that room and all the things that do that. And then you got another crew that's like up in the cockpit, and the captain might be up there on the cockpit with everyone else, but there's probably someone driving that whole room that he talks to. So he probably just talks to the leaders of all the different rooms, if you know what I mean. But they all filter it down and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way this would work on a real warship is you have loads of different nets. So my job on a warship when it was in action was I was effectively driving the ship. It didn't mean I was on the wheel. It meant I was giving instructions to the person on the wheel, And what that enabled me to do, if you imagine everything was given in like 360 degrees. So I needed to make a 90-degree turn right. So I would give an order for starboard wheel. I would tell them what I wanted to alter to. And effectively then I could forget about watching the ticker move across on degrees, because his next job when he was 20 degrees away from that bearing is he would then say, passing 340, that would focus my attention back into the maneuvering part of the ship. And what it gave me the ability to do is I was also responsible for, if there were aircraft in the formation, calling out where they are. And it's kind of a long and complicated explanation, but effectively what you want your capital ship fleets to be able to do is you've got your captain and he's fighting the whole ship. So when torpedoes happen, he's not just going, oh, there's torpedoes. He's got to make sure all the guns switch target to those torpedoes. He's probably going to have to make sure the ship turns to the right direction. So he's going to have to talk to the pilot. He's going to have to tell everyone to brace, because if you've got people on that side of the ship, you probably need them to move away from it if they're not in something where they can't move. So he's going to have a whole bunch of things to do. And like you're saying, with the crews within a crew, he's going to want to say to his pilot, come right, make as small a target as possible for those torpedoes. Gunnery officer, get the gunnery crews to target those torpedoes, and then do like an all ships broadcast, like the battle stations sort of call, but incoming torpedoes, right side, brace, brace, brace. And that, sorry, go.
I'm just, as a non-military person, I'm kind of sitting here thinking sometimes you'll play with people and they always want to know why they have to do something. So how, I got two questions for you. The first one is, how hard was it for you, transitioning, from a civilian to a military person, just to kind of, I don't mean blindly follow, but that is kind of what I mean. How do you just do what someone tells you and kind of hold back that urge to question, and how badly does that affect things when someone just doesn't do as they're told, so to speak?
So the reason we're focusing mainly on capitals is, if you take the example of the Hammerhead, right? On the Hammerhead, you've got 9 people in total. So fine. It's easy enough to have them in one Discord channel. You just tell people to shut up when they don't have important information. All the chatter drops off. You focus on the fight, exactly like you do in any other raid. And then when things calm down and you're just killing trash, as it were, you get back to the calling each other idiots and all that sort of stuff, right? You imagine something like the Javelin, which is somewhere between 20 and 30 crew. Now, they're all having to talk to each other. So the engineers are talking to each other about which repair tools they need. The gunners are divvying up targets amongst themselves. The guys controlling the large size 9s at the back are then coordinating with their guns to either make sure they're all hitting the same target or hitting different targets, depending on what instructions they've been given. The reason I relate that to your question is it's really easy to follow instructions on a modern warship, because what most people lack is situational awareness. You imagine you're sat in, the engineer room on a Hammerhead. You've got no idea of what's going on. You've got no idea of what you're fighting, what you're close to, what it looks like outside the ship. It makes it easy to follow instructions because you have no situational awareness of what's going on. You've got no frame of reference. So it is literally, I'm going to do this because I have no other means of determining what I need to do.
Yep. And they know, just know that they need you to help them. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And there are so many different parts that come together. So I'm not suggesting for a second that this would work in the game, but to kind of elaborate a little for people that might not be kind of familiar with this sort of world. Depending on the type of missile you're fighting or whatever, they obviously they're programmed to behave in certain ways. I didn't have that information as part of my job. I didn't have the binder to hand with, okay, it's this sort of missile, this is what it does, this is what it's seeking, whether it's radar, whether it's heat, whether it's, partly passive, partly active, whatever. That was someone else's role. So when the ops room called up to me and said, I need you to alter to this course, I trusted in their professionalism. And it's like, right, they've got the information, I haven't. It might look weird from where I am, but I don't have the whole picture. So it's almost that Sean Connery, turn towards the torpedo and increase speed, and they're all like, yeah, this dude's having second thoughts, he's going to kill us all. And he had the information of the torpedo, if we hit it fast enough, the torpedo's not going to arm and it's just going to bounce down the deck. Now, in real life, not quite like that maybe, but you get the impression. It's kind of, I think that's an example that everyone's seen and relates to this. You know, your gunners, you think the most important thing you're hitting is the Perseus, and all of a sudden you're told to switch targets. It's because, in theory, if CIG get capital ship combat right, that's what's going to happen. Your commander is going to have a lot of situational awareness, but no direct control over systems in the ship. So it's going to be his. Sorry, go on.
So what I'm kind of hearing is that, like, you had faith in that other people had the training that you had, and as you said, you called it professionalism. So it's they know their job and you know your job, and so you really are putting yourself faithfully in each other's hands. But because you went through that training process, you know that they have as well. Okay, all right, that makes more sense. So what I'm kind of like now relaying that into Star Citizen, it basically means the more you practice this, the better you'll get. Is that a fair analogy? Like, because so obviously, exactly. If you jump on an Idris the first day, you're all going to be shit and get slaughtered, and then the more you work together, you'll probably find out that certain people are better at better roles and stuff like that. So maybe playing other games, just see how good people are, would be a benefit beforehand.
Yeah, you know, exactly. Having some sort of experience of working together is vital, right? We can all see this again. I'll link it back to World of Warcraft. This is the reason so many people hated looking for raid, because you'd end up with so many numpties who didn't know what they were doing, and they'd always stand in the stuff that if someone stood in it would wipe everyone. Right? Guilds were so good because they practiced together, they knew who their strengths were, where their weaknesses were, they worked together to offset it. It's going to be exactly the same in this. The game I always kind of liken this back to, on its most basic level, is a World War II game called Hell Let Loose, right? Very much recommend if anyone likes this sort of stuff. But their tank gameplay, as commander, you have a periscope. So you've got really good zoom ability, you can look around yourself really quickly. You literally just as fast as you move the mouse, you can look around. So you can see behind you, you can see where infantry's creeping up. You've got the best kind of, because you're also highest in the tank, it really does make a difference. So you can look over hedgerows, spot stuff, and then your tank gunner just shoots through them. Your tank gunner has nothing but a gun sight. There's no third party, there's no nothing. So that tank gunner can only see this tiny circular view wherever the gun's pointing. And then your driver has a box slit that they see out of and a machine gun to control. But again, they can't see to the side of them, they can't see behind them. So when you're maneuvering, you have to be able, especially when you're reversing, the commander has to relay that information to the driver. For the gunner, the person who always spots the target first is the commander. So again, being able to relay information to the gunner. And you'll find in Hell Let Loose, you can see the tank crews that are used to working together because they rack up ridiculous levels of kills. And it's going to be the same with retaliators. You know, people who commonly recruit retaliator together are going to do better, almost by definition, most times, than three people who just go, I've just bought a retaliator, never flown one before. Should we take it up in combat against that retaliator?
I think you'll be able to.
They might pull it off, but
you'll be able to flip that out to multiple crews, like repair crews, everything. Everyone that works together, you'll become a more well-oiled machine. But yeah, okay.
And so if we look at,
starting to get the picture of this now, like where they're all going to be working together. You've got, you know, and you'll be able to play to your strengths. So if you are an engineer person, you can do an engineer thing. You can. There are multiple crews within one ship. It's not. You could, you know.
This is where essence, we can extrapolate it. Sorry, this is where we can start extrapolating it from real world into the game. So for those that have seen it, you'll know what I'm talking about. There's the power nodes and the power relays. And they use it commonly on a hammerhead, and they show you that, you know, if you switch everything on, like when you're in battle, you're using a lot more power from, you know, you're using a lot more fuel, you're using a lot more from the batteries than when you're normal running. There's no threat. So you just have one set of relays on that power everything. Obviously, normally in battle, you have multiple sets on, because if you take damage somewhere, power is uninterrupted because the other set of relays are already running. And this is where I think you are definitely going to take experienced capital ship engineers versus inexperienced ones, because they're going to know the layout of all those power relays so much more intuitively. So they'll be able to look at a problem where you've lost a bunch of damage because you've taken a lot of damage in one area, and they'll very quickly go, right, if we repair that singular relay there, that's going to solve the whole problem. But that will happen much quicker than them just looking at one relay, or looking at it and trying to figure it out in their heads. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I'm hearing all those old episodes of Star Trek where relay on deck 14 needs repair, Captain. So yeah,
Exactly that.
Yeah. 100%. So maybe we should go through some of the different types of crews that we could expect to see. Then is that something we could go through?
Yeah. So there's stuff. Yeah, absolutely. So the sort of crew roles that you're going to see a lot more of in capital ships. And we know this because we can see it in the funding goals. We've seen this stuff in Inside Star Citizen. So none of this is extrapolation. This is all stuff they're going to give us, right? Damage control, because we've seen the fire stuff. We've seen the firework that they've been doing on fire propagation and it removing oxygen from the space, replacing it with toxic gases. So that's going to happen. They've also mentioned in the stretch goals, potentially being able to drop bulkheads to stop fires, also to stop boarders and prevent their progress through a ship.
And we've
got boarding.
I still think
that's happened already. Sorry, go on.
I still think that's, like, you brought up a fire truck in discussions, I think 3 or 4 months ago now, and I still think now, like with things like you just mentioned there, that's why we may get a fire truck, a ship that's designed to repressurize a ship and stuff like that, and help put fires and all that stuff out. Yeah, sorry. A total sidestep.
The boarding thing's already happened. Everyone's had someone sneak aboard their ship, or they've snuck aboard someone else's ship. It's just going to be a bigger scale. And they even mentioned things like the Tavaran Prowler. Actually, that was its whole role, was to get people aboard UE warships. So there's that. The repairs thing's going to happen. What I'd really like to see on this front, I think, is, because again, this is all in game, those that have seen it, the crash satellite where you have to find the data blade, and you pull the blades out and he's turning it round, and on the back it's got the name of the blade, and it turns out that it's not there, it's been taken back to a pirate base. But something like that translated into repair, where you've got to find the right part for a system. So something's broken, you open the cabinet with all these blades in, and there's banks, and one of them sparking, so it's somewhere in that bank. So you're frantically pulling the boards out, visually inspecting them for damage. You find one that's damaged, you run off to your spares, you find a ready-to-go one, you come back, slot it in, reset the system, and off you go. And it would just make it so much more interesting than, we were kind of talking earlier, than run up to cabinet, hold F to fix.
Yeah.
Because, that's not...
I think it's going to go a little bit more than that too, with the subcomponents as well. But yeah, I get your whole meaning.
Yeah.
As well.
Absolutely. And then you've got fleet control. They've talked about a fleet command module for the Aegis and the Javelin, again in the stretch goal, so people that want to go and find it. It's also been mentioned, bizarrely, for the Hornet tracker as like a mini control ship. And that's going to be, for those that play Eve, that's your fleet commander.
I almost think that
the person making the calls for the entire fleet.
I actually almost kind of think that that's the ship that would kind of like gather a squadron's worth of stuff, and that's then sent back to, say, a bigger ship like an Idris that's controlling the entire battle. So as we talked about, like that hierarchy, so it's information being sent back right up to one person that's got this huge overview, and they're just like, you saw in those World War II movies, and they always have that L-shaped stick, and they're like, and the troops will move up here. That thing, but in a big 3D globe, essentially. Yeah, so
absolutely, yeah. Because one of the things that came up, like we were talking about it earlier today, about the Javelin's, crew complement versus how many beds it's got. And this is something that's very common with capital ships in the real world. So I worked on HMS Bulwark, I worked on HMS Illustrious. They have a lot of spare beds. In the carrier, obviously, mainly for the air wing when it's embarked, and the air crews, the deck crew, all of their controlling and op staff and all that. What it also tends to be is room for a commander afloat. So this is the admiral and his battle staff, and they are not fighting the ship. They are using the ship to coordinate the fleet. And we might be able to get smaller versions of this, like the tracker in smaller ships. Maybe it's something they add to the Polaris or the Idris. But the bigger the ship, the more capable that system's going to be. The more channels you're going to be able to add. And this is basically, you know, the captain being able to open up a channel to his escort captains. So the admiral will be able to, you know, we've got fighters coming from this direction. We need you to screen the fleet.
Ironically,
so it's that one channel.
So ironically, the bigger the ship becomes, the more ships it would be able to look after, and that makes a lot of sense if you think about it. Like where you've probably just got a small little squadron with the tracker, you go up to say something like you mentioned the Polaris, that would probably have, you know, more ships. But then when you're getting up to the Javelin and the Idris, that could be doing multiple other Javelins and other Idrises and all that as well. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Exactly.
They got the computer power to deal with it as well. So yeah. All right.
And that explains the extra beds on those larger ships. So it certainly looks like that's what they're aiming for.
So I want to talk a little bit about weaponry now, because I think we're obviously going to have bigger guns on these capital ships. So do you want to go into that a little bit? Like how do you feel that's because I look at the hammerhead that you gave as an example earlier. Is it going to be just a bigger extension of that, or where do you see that going?
So I think we've kind of seen the advent of this start bizarrely, and here we go, I get to mention it. Yay, so happy. The Perseus is that it's very specifically mentioned in the information with the Perseus that the armaments, the main armament, those two big turrets with the size 7s are slow to track and not very effective against fighters because of it. We've all seen what size 7s will do to fighters. We know the weapon's effective. It's the tracking system. And obviously, you know, everyone's seen the Bengal. They've seen that whopping great turret under it.
Right.
That sort of thing is going to be completely ineffective against fighters. It's just not going to move that fast. This is big ships duking it out at long range compared to everything else. You know, you're going to see these things as a power signature from tens, if not hundreds of kilometers away.
And I don't know, you correct me if you think I'm wrong, but things like the Bengal's guns, they're basically designed to kill other capital ships. They're not, like, I almost think of that on the Idris railgun, how we actually see that firing on players. I don't think that's going to be super common. Because not just I think the price of firing some of those armaments are going to be quite expensive, and I think you're going to want to use it against a ship that's. Let me give you an analogy: the Polaris torpedoes, right? They cost the price of an Avenger, but they're probably designed to take out something more capital sized. Using a size 9 torpedo to kill, say, something like an Avenger is completely overkill, right? So while you could do it, I don't know if you would. You know what I mean? So,
absolutely.
I don't know. Like,
you know, and again, to use like the naval analogy, if anyone's seen Greyhound with Tom Hanks, there's lots of scenes in that where he's dodging torpedoes, and that's exactly what the smaller escorts did. The destroyers were incredibly fast, ridiculously maneuverable in comparison to their big ship brethren, and they would see torpedoes coming and they would maneuver. Even battleships would have maneuvers they would employ against torpedoes to try and confuse people that were dropping them, to try and throw off their targeting solutions, because most of that was manual or very simple math that relied on the battleship moving in a straight line. It's why there were zigzag plans for fleets to try and throw off torpedoes being fired by U-boats. So there's lots of that sort of stuff that is straight portable. And I think if CIG are going to go for that realism with their torpedoes are going to be, they're going to be massively ineffective against stuff like the Avengers. So I think, like small and medium craft, if they get hit by torpedoes because they've gotten in the way, I think if that's the way that CIG are going to go, it will be catastrophic, but it will be a waste of a torp.
So now I've got another question that's off the thing again.
Mhm.
I think, look, I've always pictured the torpedoes are more sized at what the ship is. So if it's a really large torpedo, it's designed for capital ships, and if it's a really small torpedo, then maybe it's more targeted at fighter. Where a smaller
Yep.
torpedo practically won't do any damage, especially when you start to bring in things like armor. So I
Mhm.
would expect like a gladiator torpedo not to do very much. Like it might do armor damage, but I don't think it would do anywhere near as much damage as what a really big torpedo. Am I wrong in that assumption?
No, not at all. So, the reason torpedoes were as easy to evade as they were is because of the amount of the size of them. The larger they become, the more unwieldy they become, the harder to maneuver. Um,
They're more of
and
a straight line weapon. Like you kind of fire them
yeah,
and they fire
very,
in a straight line. I remember like
very
playing a
much
lot of
so.
World War II boat games when I was younger, and half the thing was just turning the boat to avoid this straight firing
Mhm.
torpedo. So maybe that is how torpedoes have become. They're straight firing, and so therefore they're
Yes.
more inclined to bigger ships because the bigger ship's got to move to get out of the way, where a fighter could just. And maybe
Yeah.
maybe the smaller they are, the more maneuverable the torpedo is. So you've got this juxtaposition, as you said. So the bigger ones just don't really turn, but the little ones can
Mhm.
turn, but they just do far less damage. That would be
Yes.
the
And,
balancing.
um, and what we are seeing at the moment, sorry, Fly decided to make its presence felt in my episode. Thanks, mate. Um, I spilt some beer last night. Drunk Dave, not good. Sorry.
Yeah, it's all good.
And the flies found it. So the the time period that we're looking at, people will commonly refer to Star Citizen as World War II in space. That time period, yeah, torpedoes didn't track for a whole bunch of reasons. Mainly, they lacked the technology at the time. Nowadays, it's not so much the case. You have homing torpedoes and everything else. But yeah, I think because if you make big torpedoes track everything and they're just as maneuverable as missiles, it just there's no drawback to using them other than their massive cost. And that is a big drawback, don't get me wrong, but it's just like, well, I'll just employ. Whereas, you look at missiles against capital ships, I would expect them not to be able to target particular subsystems. While you can with your ship, with your weapons, and you can see that area, a missile, the way they work, they either go for the hottest part, or they'll be programmed to look at a radar cross section from their radar, and they'll just aim for like a specific point, whether it's middle, whether it's slightly towards the front, whether it's slightly towards the back, slightly higher, slightly lower, depending on what the missile's designed to do, and they all do different things. It doesn't look and go, oh, that looks like a weapon system. I'm going to hit that and see if I can get all those missiles to cook off. That's not how they work.
So
So maybe that'll be the.
just to reiterate and clarify. So do you see
Sure.
missiles more for fighters and torpedoes more for the bigger ships? That's what I'm
Yeah.
hearing. Okay.
I would imagine the main defeat for missiles against capital ships will be the capital ship armor.
Yeah.
It just won't carry a sufficient payload. Maybe it gets lucky. Maybe it does hit a component or knock out a turret, damage a shield relay, whatever it is. But by and large, I think they're just going to leave really ugly dents in armor and not much else. Not for the big stuff.
Do you think that it could also be this, and this is just a total speculation on my part, you feel free to give me your opinion. Missiles
Mhm.
kind of go faster, so they don't really go through shields, but torpedoes, because they go slower and straight and are more manual, they may go straight through shields, and that would then also give them an advantage over capital ships, because they just go straight through, hit the armor.
Yeah, that's it. Or
Kind of like,
if
kind of like
TIG
my,
want them to hit the shields,
kind of like we were saying.
massive overwhelming damage.
Sorry, kind of like we were saying about mines,
Mhm.
because I think they may be the same. They may
Yeah,
just drift through the shields. So torpedoes could be like a straight line fired mine, kind of like when you see with the Delta, the Mustang Delta, how it's got the dumbfire missiles, but rather than dumbfire missiles, they're kind of like just a straight fire torpedo. I don't know.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, if you can fly a Nox through shields without it
Yep.
detonating on the shields, it's really hard to explain why a torpedo wouldn't. I
Mm.
suppose you could just like hand wave your it's because it detects
Mm.
the explosives. Fine, whatever. If that's the way they're going to go, that's fine. But I think torpedoes are going to be, and the really interesting one I think will be the dumb-fired torpedoes. So not the ones that lock on. People actively changing the mode to dumb fire and almost doing with eclipses a completely non-alerted torpedo strike against a capital ship.
I'm
so
getting
the first thing on that ship knows is that, oh god, now we've detected the heat signatures of inbound torpedoes. We didn't get a lock on. We didn't see the delivering ship at all because of the stealth capability. That'd be quite terrifying.
Yeah, I get the feeling that any kind of electronic thing is blocked by a shield, so that's why lasers are blocked by shields, but ballistics kind of come through a little bit. But then there's the speed that the bullets move at. So if you can slow the speed down of what's coming through, it's if you ever seen the Expanse, where they transfer through
it's on my watch list.
Okay,
next time I'm on leave, I'm going to binge watch the bad boy.
I won't tell you what it is, but there's basically this thing, and if you go through it really fast, it basically like stops you like a brick, like a brick wall. But if you go through it slowly, it lets you transfer through it. So it's kind of a little bit like that. So if you're firing lasers through because they're hot and they're fast and electronic, it kind of stops it. But bullets go through, but they're stopped a little bit. But if like a mine just like floats right through, boom. I think that would make sense, and it also obviously is not going to kill living matter, and it's you could probably fly like the Prowler. The Prowler's going to have to be able to go through shields to do what they're talking about. It's going to have to do that. So I think physical-based things, like you work that through logically in your head. I think physical-based things are more what armor is for. And when you start railing that armor back to not just capital ships, you can start to see the effect it's going to have on all the fighters and all that stuff as well. And one of the I'm going off a little bit tangent here, but like the Hurricane versus the Scorpius. Right now, those two things look so similar on paper, but I think when the armor comes in, there's going to be a different game. So yeah,
absolutely agreed.
Yeah, is there anything else? Do you want to wrap it up, or we? I think we're done.
Yeah, no, I think it's just worth mentioning. You know, a few things really. There's going to be a huge player requirement for this stuff, and we have stayed away from the fleets that go with them because there's just so many. You can just extrapolate that infinitely. There's so many combinations that could run. And if there's a desire for it, then maybe we look at that in a future video. But I think one of the most important things is like the soft kill versus hard kill. So one of the key differences between big ships and small ships, capital ships and other, is going to be that most of the time they're going to be killed not because they explode violently in space.
They're going to be
but
disabled.
Because they become disabled to the point where they can no longer fight.
Because they're also so much more valuable.
So for something like the Javelin, you would expect, either to knock out the power. Sorry.
No, that's right. They're just going to be so much. Sorry, I'm having a little trouble. Just so you know, the whole episode you've been dropping for a couple of seconds every now and again. Yeah, it's been happening the whole episode. Sorry. Just so you're aware, it's all good. The capital ships are so much more expensive that as a ship they're just so much more valuable. And we always know that the game is built as it is now is going to change to more of a time to kill game, and so all these systems with the Newtonian physics, the thrusters and all that, a lot of the ships are going to become a war of attrition, and I think it's going to be way more exacerbated, so to speak, with the bigger the ship is.
Yes,
and they're going
to. For the big capital ships, you can't do this with a Constellation or a Hammerhead because there isn't that much ship to hide components in. So by default, the components are close to the armor and the surface of the vessel. Whereas when you look at like the Idris, the Javelin, just like any organism, all the important systems are going to be in the center of the ship. So you've got so much armor and other things to hit before you can actually damage those components. So the kills for those platforms are going to be your Javelin has had its size 9s disabled and most of its turrets knocked out. So you're still fighting. People on board aren't dead. There's no catastrophic explosion in space. You're just unable to fight back to any great effect now. And, that's a soft kill. Hard kill is bang, boom, it's done. Little bits of it all over the place. That's a hard kill. With capital ships, we're going to see so many more soft kills, and that's going to be down to the physicalized damage, down to the fact that later on, and we know this, CIG have stated this multiple times, to make something explode in the future, once we have armor and physicalized damage, you're going to have to hit something that explodes. And as we've said with capital ships, that's going to be packed away in the center of the ship. where it's much, much more protected. So yeah, it's going to look very, very different. But then it's into the really fun gameplay loops of, okay, so you've won, you've knocked out a capital ship's engine, say. Now comes the boarding to take it over and add it to your own fleet.
It's not so much killing the ship. I think it's going to be killing the crew in a lot of instances, like explosive decompression, boarding, as you said, and things like that. I just think the weakness of the ship is not the ship. It's the contents, the people, as you said.
The squishy people in the middle.
Yep. Yeah, and the components too. Like the first ship I was thinking of when you were talking about the components was the MSR. That's just got a lot to learn. Well, move your components around, please, because like all in the one spot, that's a super weak point. But
yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
like I even think to this day, like most people are going to target the back left of that ship, because if they can get into that component room, that thing's dead in the water. So, and I think a skill of the game will actually be learning where the biggest weak points. So like if we keep hitting this Idris right here, it'll eventually do this, that'll cascade and do all this. And over time, people will learn that. They will learn, like I'm almost expecting, you correct me if you think I'm wrong, but they'll move component rooms because they'll put it somewhere and they didn't realize that it would cause it to do this. Because like if you're having full Newtonian physics and everything, they'll go, shit, like this is just a massive weak point. And they're game developers, so they'll just go, right, we had to move it from deck 1 to deck 2 because everyone was just attacking the shit out of this, and they found that they could just use one disruptor and one torpedo to that particular spot, and the whole ship was dead. You know, like so people will find that out. That's the meta, not the you know, like which ship is better than the other when it comes to fighters, right? It's going to be like knowing exactly where to hit these things to break them down.
Yeah, absolutely that. And you know, the other thing, you know, Puppets in our supporters chat at the minute mentioning this, so shout out to him. The power control is going to be important, because the flip side of being knocked out is choosing when to repair relays and stuff is going to be really key as well. So you might have the point where you think you've achieved a soft kill on a javelin, say, and all they're waiting for is to flip the switch to the power, and their size 9s are going to come back online, but they're waiting for you to get closer before they do that.
Yeah,
and they almost get a point blank size 9 shots into your hull. So yeah, there's the power control definitely is going to be important for these big ships.
They wait till you pull up alongside, connect the dock, and then they just turn all the turrets back on and go bah, 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 bah. And you can't leave because you're docked. That'd be hilarious. I could see
Absolutely.
that. Look, I showed you before the episode, and I'm going to wrap it up here. But to me, I want that Star Wars Episode 3 intro. That first big scene with all those fights, like that's the dream, like the mega dream. I don't know if we'll get there with the shards and all that stuff, but yeah, I even think just a fight between two javelins would be fairly impressive. But is that kind of what you envision, something like that? These huge, massive epic space battles?
That's the mecca, isn't it? I mean, that would be the absolute pinnacle of fleet combat in any game ever. To be in something that's so big it looks like it can only come about through a scripted set piece, and yet you know that every other ship has got its human crews. Okay, a couple of AI players in there as well, I'm sure, but human crews all working together, all coordinated against each other, or even looking at you, Operation Pitchfork, a massive human operation against the Vandal. You know, something like that would just be, that would be mind-blowing. It would be absolutely mind-boggling. And it's part of the reason I'm such a Star Citizen fan, is the promise of something like that. We are, because I can read the comments now before you've written them, a very long way from this. And I'm sure much of what we've talked about will change. But what we've done our best to give you is, this is how it works in the real world. Here are the systems that CIG have got, you know, planned, and this is what it could look like in the game. So hopefully that's been useful and enjoyable. And if you want to see anything else for that, let us know down in the comments. You know, hit like, subscribe, all those good bits. And
I was just going to add,
see if I can get this right the first go.
Yeah, the one tech that's going to make that all possible is that object container streaming. The way that The real big thing that differentiates this game from any other type of MMO or anything like that that's come before, everything else has been radial based, and the closer you get, the more information it sends you. The containers within containers thing, that makes it so much more interesting, because like you could literally have 100 people on an address, right? But all the information you're actually getting if you're on the outside is what are the guns doing, what direction is the ship heading in, and that literally almost takes 100 people down to the information of one player. Right? And that's what makes this so workable. Like you can actually get a fighter, and there's as much information coming out of that one fighter as there is out of 100 people coming out of an Idris. And that's why these huge, massive fights will actually be possible. So if you really want to know how these real big fights are going to work, go look into object container streaming, because that's the thing that is like, that's the real big revolutionary thing with Star Citizen. Like you can look at all the other tech like server meshing and all that, but object container streaming and the way those containers work, no one else has that. And that requires so much more setup than a normal game. And but once it's there, you can already see the improvements, because they have object container streaming in Stanton right now. And when it came online, you go back and ask anyone for when it came online, the benefits were the performance increases were massive. And it's only, and the game's not even optimized yet. So when that comes through. And anyone that plays WoW, like you talked about WoW badges, is you'd go into Orgrimmar or any of the capital cities, and it would lag like crazy, because there'd be 200 people at the auction house trying to buy a dog or whatever, and that won't matter, because you can literally break the auction house up into, like, they have multiple auction houses. You can break the city up into containers, and therefore it's not radial based. It's you'd have 50 people right next to each other in 2 separate rooms, but they're not affecting each other. And that server meshing part is where you can instantly transfer from one server to the other. That's the last key piece. Server meshing and object container streaming, totally different game from anything else. And that's what's going to make capital ship combat possible.
Yes.
So that's why everyone's waiting for server meshing. Anyway. All right, that's my rant. But yeah, he's been Badges. I've been Execute. Again, like, subscribe, let us know in the comments, and yeah, we'll see you in the next one.